Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Nahmadu nasalli ala Rasul Kareem Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Welcome to one and all of you sitting here at the Suleiman Law Auditorium in Durban. We are on Facebook Live. People from Canada, Birmingham, Cape Town, and other places are watching us. So welcome to all the viewership worldwide web, so we get there. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're going to try and get to the matter as quickly as possible. Being Facebook Live, we don't want people to be straining their eyes on the screens, so it will be short and sweet introduction. But suffice to say that this is a very important topic for us, I think. Stephen Hawking died last week, and his contribution is something that not many of us are familiar with, and I thought it would be important for us to come to at least some knowledge about him and what he's done. And there was no other person that came to my mind when I thought about the topic except Omar Moosa, Advocate Omar Moosa. But before I get there, let me just say a few things. So this is the Suleiman Law Auditorium, which we've launched last year in October. And the idea is to have a forum or a venue of this nature to talk, to discuss, to dialogue, to familiarize ourselves with agendas and topics that are not ordinarily discussed in the community in particular, and more so in the masjid. Now, you probably will never get a talk like this in the masjid. So we have to actually, unfortunately, go out of the masjid to cater for this kind of discussions and topics. So we've had a number of speakers here already, starting from Zakia in October 2017 when she launched the center on 20th of October. Then we had Umar Farooq Abdullah, a great scholar, a great Sufi from the UK in December. And you'll be shocked to know this, that suddenly Cat Stevens pitches up and he sits right here, fortunately next to me as well. Then we had Abdul Hakim Murad, also known as Tom Winters, Timothy Winters, sorry, and he was here in January. And then we had a number of other speakers. Last week we had Saadullah Khan here. Previously we had Sister Iman Siddiqui from the USA. So we've had lots of these high-profile international scholars and speakers coming and addressing us and speaking to us on a number of topics for us to engage in the community. For today's topic, Stephen Hawking, Time in Islam, I think this is a very appropriate topic. Now, if you've been listening and watching and coming in contact with the social media, there's always some issue around everybody who happens to be a celebrity and dies. And Muslims are posting, no, he was an atheist, we don't have time for him, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's totally unfair. And I picked, by the way, sorry, we are on Facebook, so if you are tweeting, WhatsApping, you're on live on any social media, this is our Facebook address. So facebook.com, islamicforum.today. I tested it and it's live. So yeah. Just to say something about the Islamic point of view about somebody who's not a Muslim, who's a celebrity, who's made huge contributions, whether you agree or disagree with him, what does the Prophet ﷺ say about this type of personalities? And I think this is a very important, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can get a sense of it, that even the death of non-Muslims was something that the Prophet ﷺ recognized. And there was one particular incident in the life of the Prophet himself. Abu Mutib bin Ubayyah was one such person. And in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ narrates that even if Mutin was alive and requested the captive from Badr be released, he would have done so. The Prophet even let Hassan bin Thabit, may Allah be pleased with him, write some poetry in memory of his praiseworthy traits, character, and deeds. So you can see that the Prophet was a humanist. He understood people. Even if he was a mushrik and kafir and he passed away, he was still the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and him was the spirit and the ruh of Allah. Therefore, we must respect that. So there was a lot of social media thing going around, and I think that's fine. I find it rather distasteful. And this is by Habib Ali, who is one of the very prominent scholars of our times currently. He posted this. So what about Stephen Hawking himself? Hence, we are doing this to know more about him, and also to know more about our perspective, an Islamic perspective, and perhaps a deeper insight into what Stephen Hawking has to say. So we won't go too much into that. I just thought a few clips of him. Phenomenal person. At the age of 22, has a motor neuron disease, which debilitates him. Literally, he has no muscular movement on his entire body except for his face. He lost his speech as well. And he communicated using his cheek muscles with a voice synthesizer. And that's amazing. So he was at 26, he was bedridden. And he lived till about 70, I think it was? Yeah. 76. So he lived till 76. I mean, that's 50 years. And he still produced an enormous amount of information and knowledge about the cosmos and human. So just something that I just quickly picked up from the internet just to say that these are some of the things. I thought the one on intelligence is the ability to adapt to change is some new definition of intelligence for us. So look at the books that he's written and so on. I mean, this is really amazing stuff. Yeah, and you can see his famous one was The Brief History of Time, which was a bestseller. And I think the last one I thought he said this before he died, Properties of Expanding Universe. And I think, well, you might touch on those issues where the Quran talks about an expanding universe, by the way. The Big Bang Theory you talk about it is something the Quran has as well. So some amazing things about him. So, okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Just to say a few words about our guest speaker, Advocate Omar Moosa, Senior Counselor. We go back actually a long way. We were in school together, we matriculated together, so we have that kind of association. And Omar, I'm going to say something about you a little later, but he's from Durban, graduated Orient School. He's now the chairman of the Orient School Governing Board for a long time. His interest in cosmology has been there since he was 12 years old. So he was actually passionate about this science and the study of the universe. So you can say for almost over 50 years he's been delving into this topic. He spoke last year at the Idgah, very briefly, and I just touched upon a few things as well. So I think he's a community activist. He's been around, senior counselor, advocate, and I think most of us know about the family he comes from, the Moosa family in Durban. Something I want to say lastly is that he's the one that we went matric together. I think grade 9, I think. We went together. We went to the first MON camp in Salam. I remember that one very clearly. We in grade 11. Standard 9, grade 11. And then 2 years later, his brother-in-law Nazir Javeri becomes the chairman of the Durban MON branch. And then Umar tags me along and says, come, let's go to the meeting, the first MON branch meeting with Nazir Javeri. And that's how I got roped in. So may Allah bless you for that effort. He got me hooked and he went home, you see. So anyway, that's our little association. So Umar, without much ado, I want to call you upon to present your ideas on time and Islam. For those who came in late, welcome. Please note that we're on Facebook Live. We have our editor, Farooq Khan, welcome. Farooq, you were writing a story, eh? And Ashraf Moosa is taking the picture. So people have requested it, some media people, Muslim views in particular, wanted this recorded. Lots of other people have shown interest in it. So we're hoping that this will be a really fantastic presentation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Firstly, Muhammad and Islamic Forum, thank you very much for inviting me. In introductory remarks, you catalog all the great international luminaries that you have. I'm sorry that for this topic you stuck with the local neighborhood grasshopper type. But I'll try and ensure that your izzat is retained tonight, inshallah. Muhammad is quite right about our association and how far back we go. He's quite right. I involved in MYM, and then I left the scene of the crime. But I'm sure I'll get some sawab for getting you involved, Muhammad. I want to congratulate you and your colleagues on setting up this auditorium. Sali was with us at school, so it's a very good memorial for him, alhamdulillah. Now, this is not an easy subject, but I'll try and reduce it to its most basic. Muhammad is quite right that Stephen Hawking was an atheist. I find it quite curious that you should ask me to speak about him, because the community appears to have a very ambivalent attitude towards him. On the one hand, we know he was pro-Palestinian, so I suppose that naturally attracts you to him. As a humanist, he knew what was right, what was wrong. And then you are repulsed by the fact that he's an atheist, so it's almost like a khati-miti sweet. It's quite a paradox. You're not quite sure what to do with him. So I find it quite interesting that you should invite me. Now, I happen to share Muhammad's view because Hawking has been attacked quite viciously by the Christian church and by Muslims. And I really think that it is entirely unnecessary to attack what we refer to in laws ad hominem, to attack somebody personally. In fact, I think it's a sign of great insecurity. I think to me, it suggests a lack of iman. When someone that is that intelligent and is revered by his peers and his colleagues the world over says something unpalatable, the moment you lash out, to me, it's almost like you're afraid that this man is so clever, and if he's saying there is no God, is he going to make me doubt my faith? So to me, it's actually a lack of iman. I feel very sad when people behave like that. When there is someone that is intelligent and has technology, and if you have yaqeen, if you have complete iman, there's no need for you to be unsure of yourself and afraid and intimidated. You must embrace it. And the Islamic way is to invite people by the sweetness of your deen. You don't have to shout and attack. It's totally unnecessary. The kind of Islam that you and I practice today was one that was established by Kunya, Imam al-Ghazali, and the 300-400 years after Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is called the Hujuj al-Islam, the proof of Islam. And he was such an eminent scholar in his day that he became very conceited and arrogant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to lose his, one day in the middle of a lecture. The students were not able to get in, the ulama used to go and attend his lectures. And he just stopped speaking. Every physician in the land looked at him and said, there's nothing physically wrong. This is a spiritual illness. And then he wandered for 10 years until he, found his humility. So the idea that someone can be misguided or lose their way is not, can anyone hear me? I think this is back, thanks. It's not something unique to Hawking or other people. Even Imam Ghazali, whom we all follow, whether you know it or not, had the same experience. The difference is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his infinite mercy decided that he would guide Kunya, and he then became one of the greatest Muslims that ever lived. And we all assume that we have got iman and Hawking didn't or someone else doesn't, and as if we have done something exceptional in our life to have been given the gift of iman. Iman is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something that you and I earned, something spectacular that we did that we are rewarded with iman. It's just Allah in His reign and His mercy, and He can take it away. So, besides the fact that I think it is wrong to attack personally, I also think we must be very careful that don't assume that you can't lose your iman and you can't lose your way. Just pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never does it to you. And why, someone like Hawking doesn't find his way, only the Almighty knows. The other thing that I must caution is science in the last 30, 40 years in our lifetime has grown exponentially. It's an explosion. And there's a very dangerous tendency in the Ummah around the world to try and validate their deen through science. It's a very, very, very dangerous path to go down. At the end of the day, faith depends upon Iman in your heart. And in my experience, I've lived long enough. I've been a student of astronomy for 50 years. And I have seen over that period that science is perpetually catching up with the deen and what the Quran says. And too often people say, see what that says. The Quran must be right. It's a very, very, very disrespectful thing to say. You believe, and I'm telling you as someone who spends his life with rationality in court, I'm telling you that take poison. It is science that is catching up with deen and not the other way around. So don't look to validate your deen. The one thing that Hawking did say, he said, I cannot disprove the existence of God. Now, God is not a mathematical formula. We know that 1 + 1 equals 2 and is always equal to 2. If you could establish the existence of God by a simple equation, there'd be no purpose in this dunya at all. Everybody wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die first. There's no shortcuts in life. You've got to pass the exam of this world. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't create doubt which you're supposed to overcome, then what is the purpose of living in the first place? If you had certainty, if you could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's countenance, what's the point of living? You might as well be in akhirah. So don't expect a scientific or mathematical calculation to establish God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran repeatedly, look at my signs. For those who know, He says there are none so blind as those who will not see. Not the blind person, as those who will not see. So, at the end of the day, what you've got to appreciate is that deen is a question of faith. Surah Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim Zalik al-Kitabu, it says those who believe in their heart, not in their mind. Imam al-Ghazali said that the mind is a beautiful gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given for this dunya, but it's a very limited faculty. It's a very, very limited faculty. So don't look to intellectualize God. You have to believe in your heart and you see the signs around you. Because the difference between Islam and other deens is that Allah has given us, we say in our vernacular, aqal, but it's actually an Arabic word, aqal, which means an intellect, rationality. And the difference between us and other religions is that we are based on rationality. Logic. You can explain the logic. So those are my introductory remarks in regard to Hawking. I mean, it's not just the Muslims that attacked him, it's even the Christian church, perhaps more viciously than we have done. Now, why, you may ask, let me dispose of this before getting to the actual quantum mechanics of the matter. Why is it that someone that is so brilliant, my son works in Johannesburg with extremely intelligent people, and he says that 8 out of 10 of them are all atheists, highly intelligent people. Firstly, over 90% of scientists in the Western world are atheists. So he's a product of that environment. That was his circle. He comes from that kind of tradition. Secondly, and I must make this clear that I respect all religions, I respect all peoples. The Trinity is objectionable to us, but it's very important to millions of people. But I've had in my life many Christians who have said to me that they gave up their deen because they were not able to rationalize the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. It just doesn't make sense to them. There's barely a passing reference in the Bible to it. And during the Middle Ages, it was very convenient to expound that because people were ignorant. But today's world of enlightenment and with technology and knowledge and information, you can't bluff all the people all the time. And as a result, the Western world is becoming very, very, very atheistic, extremely non-believing. So partly they are the author of their own situation where people are becoming non-believers. To an extent, it was also born out of arrogance and conceit. Just like I said to you that Al-Kunya, Imam al-Ghazali himself had become extremely arrogant and conceited. I have no doubt that if you're such an eminent scientist, you will arrogate to yourself a level of arrogance that, you know, I don't need God, I can find the answer. So I don't want to make it sound all mushy and exculpate him from all liability. To some extent, it was his vanity and his ego. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Although he was a very funny man, a very witty man, despite they predicted he would live for 2 years and he lived for another 50 odd years. And he had a tremendous sense of humor. He used to whiz onto the stage and crack a joke through this synthesizer of his. But there was a great deal of arrogance and conceit as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates people that walk the dunya with puffed cheeks. He said, we will get to a point where everything that God knows we will know. And to me, that is a very sad statement. If you understand the complexity of science and creation, for any human being to say that, you must be slightly faulty. And there's a fine line between insanity and genius, and I think he was on the wrong side of it. Just the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. And I think he failed on that score. Another fundamental reason why you shouldn't engage in attacks ad hominem. I've never seen Facebook in my life. Muhammad tells me this is what it looks like. I don't know what Twitter and Instagram is. I hate this. I do use the mobile. It's like Dajjal. I have to have it in my pocket. I do emails and WhatsApp. You ask me anything beyond that and I'll abuse you. But I'm sure that 90% of the components there are designed by people who are atheists. But all of you very gladly use it. In fact, I've seen ulama having more cell phones than anybody else. Wallahi, I won't mention names. I went to see an alim because I'm involved in community work. He had 2 cell phones like this, and he had one of those earpieces. He looked like either air traffic controller or one of the stockbrokers. I mean, he was like having 3 conversations. I said, Mufti, what's wrong with you? And like, no, he's talking to me and he's talking to 3 other people at the same time. So talk about Guptas. The way this Western technology is captured, not me and all of you, you're all laughing. You're all using all people who are atheists, all invented these things. And all this computing, Facebook and all that. You think they all believe. So we gladly suck up what they give us and then we write all these slanderous statements. I mean, that to me is duplicitous. It's hypocritical. Don't be slightly pregnant. Then go and be like the Mormons and go and live in the Utah and you know, don't have technology and use the ox cart. I respect those people. You can't be slightly absorbed all this and then, you know, but you're a harami, you know, you can't do it. It's, to me, that is, you know, Surah Al-Baqarah starts with 5 ayats on believers, 3 ayats is on the kafir, and then 14 on the munafiqun. The worst is I'm not saying hypocrites, I'm a hypocrite. I'm saying the worst in Allah's eyes is munafiqun. So we must learn to be a little bit more mature. And don't be afraid. Now, Hawking is really the successor to Isaac Newton and to Einstein. He's considered the 3rd greatest scientific mind in the Western world. That is the eminence with which Hawking is treated. And what Albert Einstein did, Einstein was asked what happened at the dawn of creation, and he said, look, I'm a scientist, I work on observation. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what happened. So they said, yeah, but speculate. He said, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lit the fuse. Now, in Hawking's case, well, let me go back a little bit. Isaac Newton was the first person to talk about gravity. And the entire subject of cosmology revolves around gravity. You then get Einstein that comes along, and in 1905, he developed what was called the special theory of relativity. I will try and explain it in very simple terms. What the special theory of relativity says is the following, that the faster you go, you push an object, the more dense it becomes, the greater its mass. And at the speed of light, its density and mass becomes infinite and it disappears. That's the one thing. The other thing is, why it's relative is, if I'm traveling at the speed of light and I make a tawaf around the solar system and come back after, say, 2 years, a couple of thousand years would have passed on planet Earth. Now, I'll tell you what the relevance of that is just now. That time is relative. It's not, doesn't remain the same. It depends who's looking at what from where. So that was the special theory of relativity. That is, in a very crude form, what that said. Then 10 years later, Einstein developed the general theory of relativity, and what he said was this. You see, I don't mean Islamic scholars now. I'm talking about conventional wisdom. People assumed that time was eternal. Time was absolute. And that the universe was superimposed upon time. So you've got time, started eternity and goes on for eternity, and at some point the universe came into existence. What the general theory of relativity says is that time cannot exist outside of space and matter. You cannot divorce it. And the natural consequence of the general theory of relativity was it took you back to the Big Bang, in point of light in intense motion, that brought about space, material, and time. Time only started at that point, not before that. Now, it's a theory, as it says, but that theory has been proven by various experiments. As we stand here today, the general theory of relativity has not been proven 100%. There are still some doubts. But about 85%, yes. Experiments have shown they leave a clock on Earth, they put a clock in a supersonic jet and fly it, that clock moves slower than the clock on Earth. So they are very basic. You have to do highfalutin, complicated experiments to establish these things. So now you have to understand this concept that time is not absolute. It starts when creation starts. At this point, I want to pause for a minute to give you some sense of what we are talking about with the cosmos. We know that the Earth is big. I have a daughter. I hope she's listening to me from Saskatchewan. I expected 5 people, so I told my kids if 3 more can watch, it'll be about 8. MashaAllah, the room is quite full. What did I say before what did I say before the world? Sorry?
The world is big.
I have a daughter living in Saskatchewan. That's where I was hoping she's watching from. Now, to get there at my age, it takes 2 days. It takes me 2 weeks to recover, so all this my wife does is FaceTime is good enough. The biggest planet in the solar system is Jupiter. The Earth will fit into Jupiter over 1,000 times. When you see every picture of Jupiter, you see a big red circle. It's bigger than the Earth. It is a gas storm that has been blowing for the last 300 years non-stop. The Earth will fit into the Sun 1,000,000 times. To give you some idea. Some of the biggest massive black holes are 1,000,000,000 times the mass of the Sun. Just to give you some proportion of what we're talking about. The Earth at the equator, do you have any idea at what speed it rotates? It's 0.5 kilometer a second. You don't feel it, you're not flying off anywhere. It's orbiting the Sun at 30 kilometers a second. As we're sitting here now, we're swinging at 30 kilometers a second around the Sun. The solar system is swinging around our galaxy at 220 kilometers a second. And our entire galaxy is going towards a portion of the cosmos that's called the Great Attractor. It's our little local neighborhood. At 1,000 miles per second, we're racing towards that point. So that gives you some sense of size, dimensions, speed at which these things are taking place. The extraordinary thing is that the cosmos has a speed limit, just like the speed limit which all of you broke coming here because you couldn't wait to hear me. That speed limit is 300,000 kilometers per second. That's the speed of light. Nothing in this universe can go faster than that. Nothing in this universe can go faster than the speed of light. So the one constant in the cosmos, in the universe. Now that means from the moon to the earth it takes 1.5 seconds for the light to come. For the sun, 8.5 minutes. And when you look up the night sky, you actually look at the sky as it looked billions of years ago, because that light is traveling for billions of years. It's not now. When they see a supernova, it happened some billions of years ago. So that gives you some idea of the dimension. But what is even more startling, and is relevant to the discussion we're having tonight, every star is a sun. Some are similar to our sun, some are huge, some are smaller. Now, imagine the amount of sand on the Durban beach, at your house, at your home. Take a boat ride, take a ship to Australia, go on the Pacific Ocean. How many grains of sand are there on the planet Earth? You can't count it. There are more stars in the cosmos than there are grains of sand on planet Earth. That is the size of the cosmos. There are more stars in the cosmos than there are grains of sand. Grains of sand. But you see, that was all very interesting till about 30 or 40 years ago. Because when I was a little boy in school doing biology, Muhammad and I, the best we got to was an atom. And we knew about the nucleus and about the protons, electrons. What has happened in the last 30 or 40 years is quantum mechanics has come into its own. And it's now been discovered there are more subatomic particles in every single one of you than there are stars in the cosmos. So each one of you has got more subatomic particles in you than there are stars in the cosmos. So each one is universal, walking around its own. Now, that's not just to fascinate you, but to explain where Hawking came in. Because Einstein dealt with things at a very macro level, this huge cosmic level. And it takes you back 14 billion years to the Big Bang. If you accept what I told you earlier, that time can only exist in space and with matter relative to each other, when you get to that point of light in intense motion, physics breaks down. It can't exist. That point of light in intense motion has been intelligently speculated as amounting to 1/billionth of a trillionth of a centimeter. 1/billionth of a trillionth of a centimeter is that point of light in intense motion, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, kun fayakun. Now, when you get to that level, quantum physics comes into its own. Because you can't use quantum physics in the cosmos, it gets lost. But when you come down to the Big Bang, to that point of light, you are talking the same scale. And what Hawking's contribution, to put it simplistically, was he was able to complete Einstein's theory. Because Einstein's theory drove you to that point of light but couldn't explain it scientifically. But quantum mechanics can explain it scientifically. So that was his contribution. The other one that he liked to feel was his greatest achievement was Einstein had already theorized on black holes. It wasn't him. It was hundreds of years before that. Remember I said to you that gravity is central to all of this. Even light is bent by gravity. Einstein's theory also predicted black holes A black hole is when a star collapses on itself. It can't hold its own weight. And it becomes infinitely dense. So dense that even light cannot escape. The light, the fastest thing in the universe, cannot escape it. Even light can't escape it. And it has an imaginary circle around the black hole called an event horizon. It doesn't exist. It's an imaginary thing. And if you can imagine yourself going over a Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls, there's a point where you can paddle yourself back. But you get to a point of momentum where you're just going down. There's no way you can stop it. That's what event horizon. The moment you touch it, you're gone. You've gone into it. But at that point of event horizon, time is at a standstill. It's infinite density, infinite mass, and it disappears. And time comes to zero. It stops. So Hawking did a lot of work on black holes and event horizons and completed the picture that Einstein had theorized about. So if you take them in combination, what they're saying is that time, space, matter, everything started off with the Big Bang and will end up in black holes. And every galaxy has got a huge black hole in the middle of it. Now, whether all matter and all time is going to end up in the black hole, or whether the universe will coalesce again one day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. But the ayat in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when I roll up the cosmos. So, to me, Allah knows best, but it suggests that eventually this cosmos that is expanding will contract again and collapse. There were many other theories. One, that this has been going on forever. It's been bouncing back and forth. But there are various scientific experiments conducted to show that cannot be the case, because the distribution of matter would have been chaotic if that had happened, and it's too even. There was a steady state theory that said, like Aristotle believed the universe was eternal. And even up to 100 years ago, 70 years ago, people used to think it was eternal. And that as the universe was expanding one galaxy away from another, it would drop material which would then form another galaxy. That was only disproved about 50 years ago when they picked up microwaves that have been radiating from the dawn of creation. Now, if you go home and put your television set on, I'm quite child, so I watch television. When you put your TV on and you see that snow, a small percentage of that snow is the microwave from the dawn of creation, even on your TV. Some of that cut you see going down, some of it is the original microwave from the Big Bang 14 billion years ago. So when they picked that up, it revealed that there had been a moment of intense density, and that's why you still got a radiation, faint, but it's still out there. And you can actually hear it, you can actually pick it up on your television set at home. Now don't try and work out which one is which, you'll go nuts, but it's there. Trust me, it's there, because they all look the same. You're laughing, but people have thought about infinity and have gone mad. So it's very nice to have all this intellectual discussion, but at the end of the day, you've got to put food in the stomach and go make a namaz and tomorrow carry on your life. Don't sit now and like a sadhu now and start thinking about this, because you go off your rocker. You can't conceive the Akhirah here. You've got to wait to get there first to understand, because we have to transform from this into another state. But the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are there. So I don't want to spend the whole evening giving you a discourse about the different theories, except what I'm saying, that conventional wisdom accepts the Big Bang. Of course, the church in the West grabbed onto it because they said, you see, Big Bang, so now God lit the match. And of course, the Muslim scholars adopted the same. But I warned you in the beginning, please, don't validate your deen and say, you see, Islam is right. You see what science is saying? Islam is there. Science is catching up. So this was very attractive to the clergy in whichever religion. Muhammad talked about us being at As-Salam. It was 1974. I had my car, which was a Peugeot 404, smoky blue. I had no license, and 9 of us used to jump in and drive to As-Salam. And we spent 4 days at the feet of Fazlur Rahman Ansari. The man was a physicist, and he was a philosopher, and he was a theologian. And I will revert to him because in all my life, he probably gave the best description. He was a great believer in the Big Bang. In fact, he said there is a hadith. There's some controversy about how strong it is. There is a hadith that says, Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that I am of Allah's nur and you are of my nur. Now, even the scholars of hadith have said that even if it doesn't have a total line of authentication, if it makes sense, you don't reject it. And many ulama over the centuries have accepted the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was a Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And according to Fazlur Rahman Ansari's understanding, and I think he was a Sufi from my interaction with him, I've never had anybody look at me like that and see right through me. It was a very disturbing feeling. He shook my hand and it was like an X-ray. He went right behind me. He looked right through me. I'll never forget that gaze. And he said that that point of light in intense motion, in his view, was the ruah of the Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that's how he said that he's of Allah's nur and we are of his nur, because the rest of the cosmos came from that point of light in intense motion. Allah knows best. But I'm sharing with you. But I'll come back to something else he said, which is less controversial and to me is the best description of creation. But it's a bit early yet in my talk to tell you that, so I won't be too much longer. Now, I know you're an intelligent audience. I say that in the most respectful manner, and I'm sure you're following everything I'm saying so far. I hope you are, because if you don't, then I'm going to lose you now. I've given you an overview of Newton. I mean, I can tell you so much more about the bending of light and gravity, but we'll be here the whole night. Of Newton, of Einstein, and how Hawking sort of completed the triumvirate. Now, what happened was Hawking now completed, in a sense, Einstein's theory, but he was not convinced that there was an outside agent called Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that brought about that point of light in intense motion. And towards the end of his life, he theorized, he said real time only started at the Big Bang. But he postulated that there's imaginary time before real time. And out of that imaginary time, as a matter of spontaneous combustion, it was inevitable that the Big Bang would happen. Remember, I said to you right at the beginning, I'm not going to attempt to prove to you the existence of God. If I could do that, I'd be in the Akhirah, and you'd be looking at an apparition. The test is here is to believe. Remember, I also said to you, Einstein said he can't disprove God. Remember, I also said to you that unlike other deens, our deen is based on aqal, is based on intellect, rationality. Not certainty of 1 + 1, because it's iman in the heart, not in the mind. But herein lies the rub. This is where I think Hawking fell into his own trap. Hawking cautioned. He said, not only did scientists in the past believe that time was absolute, but he said the mistake today is even today's scientists, many of them still believe that time is absolute, that time has always existed, and the universe has been superimposed on time. Are you with me so far? And he said, it's a very dangerous fallacy that. Because he said, without a shadow of doubt, time, which at the end of his life he called real time, started off at the Big Bang. So he says, it's a fallacy to say time always existed. And he warned against trying to suggest otherwise. But then look what happens. He's insan, with all his genius, he makes a fatal error. In one of his speeches about 10, 12 years ago, he said, very humorous speech and very entertaining, he said, the problem that he has with God being the agent is it gives rise to questions like, so what was God doing before he created the universe? Can I ask you what's wrong with that question? What is wrong with that question? It's a question that Hawking asked, but what is wrong? What is fundamentally wrong with that question? If there's no time, then what do you mean, what was God doing before? There's no before, there's no after. It's a concept that we don't understand because we're not in Akhirah. You see, our vision of the hereafter is a never-ending series of 24-hour days. We eat and sleep and make merry and go to movies and watch TV and do all the guna that we couldn't do in this dunya, unless you Omar Moosa and do all the jahil things. And don't wait for the Akhirah. It's not, the Akhirah is not a series of 24-hour days. There's no time there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you there's no time. Don't ask me what it means. I don't know what it means. I'm not God. And I'm not in the Akhirah. But there's no time there. So how can you even ask the question which Hawking asked? What was God doing before that? How can you even ask that question? There was no before. There is no after. You're trying to mix water and oil and you expect that thing to dilute it. It just doesn't fit. You can't ask that question. The other mistake he made was he assumed that nothingness is an absolute. Now please tell me if I'm losing you. You see, you can't assume that nothingness exists on its own because that's shirk. We believe that only one thing exists and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't have side by side with him a thing called nothingness existing next to him. That means he's not all powerful. There's no such thing as nothingness. And Hawking and all the other scientists assume that nothingness has always been there. What the hell is nothingness? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made nothingness and from there brought somethingness. Am I making sense or am I losing you? He had to make nothing and from there bring something. How can nothingness exist next to him? So yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and adjacent to him is a thing called nothingness. So is that competing with him now for supremacy? Who's more powerful, him or nothingness? There can't be such a thing called nothingness. It doesn't exist. Just like we are created, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created nothingness. So against the canvas of darkness that he created, he threw a speck of light. The point of light in intense motion. Am I losing you? Now, I'm not saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot create absolute nothingness. He is all powerful, and if he chooses a location where he wants to have absolute nothingness, he can create it. But what I can tell you is what we think is nothingness is not nothingness. 90% of what you look up in the cosmos is what is called dark matter that no one's ever seen. How do we know it's there? It has a gravitational effect on huge celestial bodies that have the mass of 1 billion times our sun. Now what's going to shape that? There's something there. Every scientist accepts that 90% of the cosmos has a thing called dark matter, made up of dark matter and dark energy. No one has seen the damn thing. But it has to be there. It's deflecting light, it's moving celestial bodies, It's there. Something is moving it. It can't be seen. So it's not emptiness. They've come to that conclusion. But what is even more scary is that they've gone to the laboratory and they've created the best vacuum that human beings can create. What do you think they've seen in that? Particles. Virtual particles appear and disappear. Where they go to? Angas. Nobody has a clue. They just come and they go. They come, they go. No one knows where he goes to. Certainly the nothingness that we think exists in the laboratory, in the cosmos, is not nothingness. That's full of somethingness. But even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to make nothingness in a pristine form, absolutely nothing, He creates it. It doesn't exist. And the mistake that Stephen Hawking made and that other scientists like him make in this desperate attempt. So they tell you, be careful, don't assume that space and material and time are absolute. It had a beginning. But nothingness was there before. And what was God doing before? What do you mean what was God doing before? There's no before. There is no before. Now how does it work? I don't know. I'm not your Rabb. And I'm not in Akhirah to ask him, Ya Allah, share some of your knowledge with me now. Tell me how this thing works. I don't know. But the moment you reject time, you can't ask questions like the very question that Hawkins himself asked. You can't ask that. So the very thing he warned people, be careful, he did the same mistake. In his desperate attempt to establish that God is not necessary. He fell into a terrible trap. So my message to you is, get this out of your system if you have any love for this subject. Nothingness doesn't exist on its own. It's not an absolute. God makes nothingness and He makes somethingness. There is only Allah. There's nothing else. The Quran says the only reality is your Rabb. Now, my children argue, but Daddy, look, you can feel me. I said, yeah. But you're not real in the sense that Allah is real. Okay? I hope now you don't think I'm getting a bit woozy here, but we're not real in the sense of His reality. And this is where Fazlur Rahman Ansari came onto his own. And he said we exist in the idea of God. Now, any one of you can think of an ice cream cone. It feels nice. In fact, if you think about it long enough, you start salivating in your mouth. But we can't materialize it. Now, we are His creation. He's Rabb. He imagines and He takes a physical form. It doesn't make us real in the sense that He is real. So he said we exist in the idea of God. We are actually His imagination. And he was dealing with the question of Tawheed. Because, you know, we don't accept, my good brothers are here, Kuben and Sivi. I did say in the beginning I respect all religions. We don't believe in Nirvana. It's a lovely concept. I wish we did. That eventually you immerse yourself into God. But we don't believe that. So what First Masai was trying to do was reconcile the Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, and the fact that we are separate. And he said, you are separate, but you're actually just in Allah's thought process. For want of a better expression, we exist in His imagination. So now, your thoughts are part of you, not apart from you. So that's basically the way, that's why I said it's the best description I've ever heard. But all these are but feeble attempts to explain what to us is very inexplicable in this life, because we have limitations until we transform and see the countenance of our Lord. And that, with respect, is where I think Hawking got it wrong. He asked those questions, and I think he ought not to have asked. The very thing he said, be careful, he fell into the same trap. I've studied his imaginary time. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't fit into physics as I understand it. And I don't think that that's ever going to win popular support. Towards the end, he changed his views about the event horizon. He says an apparent horizon. He's been severely criticized on that. I don't know. That the jury is still out on all of that. But the bottom line is that if you accept my logic, not proving God, as to why you can't get to all these ideas of imaginary time and what was God doing before that, you are driven to the inescapable conclusion of an external agent that we know is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all he tells you to read in the Quran, here are my signs for you to see. I mean, what more do you want? Now, I put it to people like this. I think I'm reasonably intelligent. We all travel in fancy aeroplanes, go to Umrah. Some people go to more giant places. You sit there in your seat and you've got, 500 channels on Emirates, and every seat is exactly measured. You go to the cockpit, you've got millions of wires, and you've got this technology that people have sat around different factories and engineers and they put it together. And what the non-believers are saying is, dismantle this jumbo jet and take a huge hanger and throw every little stroke, every little wire, throw everything on the floor, and for 1,000,000 years throw light, energy and water, and it will eventually form an aeroplane with all those wires connected exactly to your seat, not 499, but 500 channels. To me, it doesn't make any sense. It can't happen. There has to be an architect. We're in this building here. You take all these bricks, put them on room, and throw all the fire. You can't put all these lights and downlighters and this Facebook and all. It can't happen. There has to be. That's all your Rabb is telling you. Can't you see the order I've put in the cosmos? Every electron goes around the nucleus anti-clockwise. Every planet goes around the sun anti-clockwise. The solar system goes around the galaxy anti-clockwise. How did the Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam know 1400 years ago, illiterate, couldn't read or write, he must go around the Kaaba anti-clockwise? Now, how you work that out? And I had ulama asking me why we go anti-clockwise, and I feel like giving them a tight step. All the ulama here. I say because you're moving right in Islam. That is why it's as basic as that. It's nothing more complicated. You're moving right. So there's just too much of order, organization, system, the rotation of the earth, the axis, summer, winter, the winds. I mean, it's just inconceivable, absolutely inconceivable, that all this can happen by accident, without. I must say that Hawking said there is a grand design. He said, I accept there's a grand design, but it's one that came about spontaneously, by spontaneous combustion. There's no architect. Having said that, he made some very ambivalent statements in his life. He said, God creates laws of physics, but he doesn't interfere on a day-to-day basis, which makes me think that he himself was not too sure. And I think he's right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not interfere. He does when you have like prophets. Musa alayhi salam throws the rod, it becomes a serpent. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam splits the moon. There are exceptional times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does disturb the laws of physics, but not on a day-to-day life. It doesn't mean he doesn't interfere with your life. You make dua and he can prevent some bala or some harm happening. It doesn't mean he can't avoid that. But you don't see funny things happening. The sun doesn't rise from the west one morning. I mean, he leaves the order that he created. So it's amazing that Hawking said a lot of things which make a lot of sense, which are very Islamic. But I just think he just lost the plot in the end. And as I said, it was partly his environment and no doubt partly his conceit. And it happens to Muslims, it happened to Al-Kunya, it happened to any one of us. So we mustn't adopt this sort of holier than thou attitude. It's between him and his Rabb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decide. And the sad thing is that a lot of the West is rejecting Allah because they can't understand their deen, the way it is. And I've had them tell me themselves, we just can't reconcile ourselves to the fact that God is the sun and earth and He bled for us, and I can't understand all this. Somebody else must atone for my sins. So I respect it. It's very important to millions of people, but I've had many Christians say to me, we've given up our deen So he's a product. He was born as a Christian, went to St. Albans school, went to a Christian school. But that environment drives them to this kind of thing. So Allah knows best. I don't know if there's anything else that I can say, Muhammad. I'd like to think I've covered the duty. I could be here the whole night. I'm an advocate.
No charge.
Yeah?
No charge.
Well, so far you think that. Okay, how long was spoken for?
40 minutes.
You told me 45 hours. Not too bad. Okay, Jazakallah wa khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry?
You stand, you sit.
I'm sit here.
Jazakallah Omar for that cosmic presentation. I think it's very challenging. I think something that we don't study, the universe. And is it multiverse or universe?
Allah says there are 7 heavens. So.
Exactly, right. So there's a multiverse, not a universe. I think when I started just really superficially looking at what Hawking was writing about, and that the fact that everything started at one singular point in singularity, and I think that is what Umar was trying to convey to us as well, makes a lot of sense. Umar, there's quite a few questions going through my mind. I'm going to open the house first for discussion and questioning. It's quite, as Umar said, it's quite a heavy topic to digest in just 40 minutes. So yeah, let me just open. Is anybody want to ask any burning questions?
Just add one.
Yeah, sure.
I just add one thing whilst you're thinking about your questions. I should add one further thing. Hawking also said that the question then arises as to who created God. And I've had Muslim people ask me that, and very sincerely, where did God come from? And that's another fallacy, because we are assuming that the notion of creation is an absolute. There is no such thing as creation. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made nothingness and He made time, the whole notion of creation is His creation. There's no such thing as creation. See, we assume by asking where did Allah come from, there's no such thing in reality as coming from. He created the idea that I will create from nothingness, I'll bring somethingness. And the mistake that he, not only Hawking, I've had someone ask me quite recently, a very, very well-read, scholarly Muslim gentleman said to me, where did Allah come from? And that presupposes that creation is an absolute. It's not an absolute. It's a bit of a conceit, if you think. I don't mean him. I mean, as an insan, we elevate the things that God made and we make them as if they are equal to or bigger than God. Creation is something He created. It doesn't exist. He came up with the idea of, just think of the whole thing as a game, and God is deciding the rules. He said, right, what I'm going to do is I'll put that dark spot here, I'm going to do this creation thing. He made creation. It's not an eternal state, not an absolute state. It doesn't exist. So you can't ask questions like where God came from. It just, Allah is there. And it's always been there. And He came up with this idea of creation. So don't start now taking things like that and start applying them to God. It's like putting the telescope the wrong way around. I hope that makes some sense, what I'm saying. I just wanted to add that just occurred to me, Muhammad. No, sorry.
Okay, do we have any questions? Yes.
Assalamu
Assalam.
alaikum. I wanted to know as to Stephen Hawking's exposure to philosophical understanding of metaphysics, the likes of Ibn Sina, the likes of Ibn Rushd, the likes of particularly Muslim scholars, who had very strong argumentations to prove God's existence. For example, Ibn Sina has the argument of they call it Burhanul Imkan wal Wujub, the argumentation of contingency and essence. So I want to know, as to what is it, to philosophical thinking, how was he exposed? How did he go into, did he ask questions from Muslim philosophers, or not only Muslim philosophers, but generally other philosophers that have proven God's existence? How much was he exposed to them and their knowledge, and so forth. Shukran.
Okay, Jazakallah. Firstly, I have a difficulty with the notion that you can prove the existence of God. I think that if you had Iman, you will say that the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abound. But if it was easy as proving the existence of God, then there'd be no test because all of us would get 100% in the exam. I have no doubt that during his life he studied all of this. But you know, I gave the example of my son. He's got a friend who he says is a super genius. I mean, the man speaks languages. He studied every deen. He studied Buddhism, Islam, and he still can't understand it. Now, there are few things to bear in mind. One is that I said to you at the beginning that even Iman is a gift. You see, you mustn't assume that you can simply expose yourself to something and you will necessarily become strong in your faith. Remember I said at the beginning, be very careful. That is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which you can take away as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that when I put a seal on your heart, that's it. So it's between his Rabb and him. There may have come a time in his life where he committed some kind of shirk. I have no doubt he did. He clearly did, his arrogance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to put a seal on his heart. And, you know, after that you can be exposed to anything you want. You will never see it. You will never see, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to see. You will never see it. You have to have that sincerity. And in my life, I'm getting to the twilight of my life. I find that Muhammad said I spoke at the Eidgah, and I said something in conclusion. I said, the condition of the Ummah today is that we are very arrogant, but we are very afraid. We've got big mouths, but we are very scared of the whole world. The Islamic tradition is exactly the opposite, and I'll explain to you why that answers your question. Our Khalif, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was send another Nabi after me, if I wasn't the Khatam al-Nabiyin, oh Umar, it would have been you. He said, when you walk the streets of Medina, he says, Shaitan shakes. But Hazrat Umar entered Jerusalem, it was a turn to walk, and his manservant was on the camel. Now here was the humility with power, confidence. Today we're the opposite. We big noise. We've got answers to everything. We complain, bang those cymbals, you know, they're using those bands. But we are so scared. We're the opposite. We're arrogant and we've got no confidence in ourselves. But what Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu and the Khilafah Rashidun, the Sahaba Ikram displayed was total humility. And I believe that Iman is a function of humility. You've got to be humble. And one of the reasons I can speculate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never have shown him the light, he was a witty man, very humorous, a good human being, but bloody arrogant. If you are the successor to Isaac Newton and Einstein, you're going to get head this will be bigger than a pumpkin. Now, it's not easy to eat humble pie. See, you and I are not like that. It's very easy to criticize, but when the whole world is lauding, when people in Oxford are standing in the rain to get into your lectures, the whole world is dropping at you every word, you start getting a God complex. I wouldn't want to be hockey. See, Allah gave him a gift of absolute brilliance, but was it a virtue or was it a vice? Would you want? I wouldn't. Allah, don't. Just let me be normal. I don't want to be no super intelligent and then I'll spend my whole life battling with my nafs. Allah, don't test me. I can't cope with all that. You understand? So you might say great man, great mind, but Allah, everybody gets their fair share. And you want to be like that? I don't want to be. I don't mean the wheelchair, that I don't wish anybody. But I don't want that kind. I don't want to be that kind of intelligence. and then you start getting a God complex. So I think that blinded him. Because he was so successful, he thought that he was able to provide the answer to everything. And you know, it's very satisfying in science when you can add 1 + 1 = 2. You get definite results. And that can become a big deception because you think you can answer everything by intellect. And Imam Ghazali said, just be very, very careful. He says, a very useful tool, but very limited. And Allah doesn't say believe in your head, He says believe in your heart. And I think he was too clever for his own good. That he was exposed, but I know other people exposed today. Why over 90% of scientists are brilliant in the West? They're all atheists. They all read, they all study. But it doesn't mean you study, you get it. That's what I said. Be humble. It's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be happy the way you are, that you got your iman in your deen, and say, Allah, please don't test me, don't take it away. Don't make my life is all rocket scientist, which all our parents want. And it's insane. All. Just be above average, man. Just be okay. Live your life and pass the baton and carry on from here. You see, so we celebrate the man's genius, but I wouldn't exchange my life for his. But it's too sad. I hope that provides you some answer. Just reading doesn't necessarily. I mean, I know Ibn Sina. I understand all of that. I've studied that. But I mean, Imam al-Ghazali wrote the Hafid al-Falasifa 1,000 years ago. He increased the philosophers. No one has answered him in 1,000 years. I mean, he destroyed the whole Greek tradition. Aristotle, Plato was demolished. But in fact, scholars say he went too far. This philosophy is an accepted Islamic science. And they said he went too far, he actually demolished philosophy. But that doesn't necessarily mean Iman. It doesn't work like that. It's not an intellect thing. Iman is in the heart.
Shukran. Is anybody else that's got? Yes, one in the back.
I don't use the mic. It's good to know what kind of views on evolution because it follows creation.
This Fazlur Ansari was asked this question 45 years ago, 45. He was of the view that the Quran is actually a textbook on evolution. I happen to share that view. According to the Islamic theology, as I understand it, all living things have a ruh, have a soul. Some, like insan, have an everlasting soul, and others, like the animals, have a soul, but it's not everlasting. They will give testimony. If you kick the dog on the day of judgment, there will be justice, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will terminate them. Now, as you sit there today, 60% to 70% of your physical body is made up of H2O, water. When you are in the embryonic stage, you're 99% water. When you come out, you're 90%. Now, although Adam alayhi salam and the son of Adam alayhi salam is made of clay, you will find in the Quran at least 2 or 3 references Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, doesn't insan understand that I made him from bani, I made him from water? In the middle of the desert with no water, some illiterate man is going to work out that insan was made from water. So, the Quran, in Fazlur Ansari's view, in my view, is a textbook on evolution. I've been to Sterkfontein. I study paleontology. I study genealogy. I believe in evolution. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did, insan has only been on the dunya as we are today, at most for 150,000 to 200,000 years. There were other monkey-like species that came down from the trees, like Australopithecus. And when we had reached a stage of development where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala felt that we were ready now to be given this, because He says in the Quran that at the dawn of creation I collected the progeny of Adam alayhi salam. All the rules that ever existed. It is reported that Hazrat Abdul Qadir Jilani, he could remember the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that he had recited the Quran in his mother's womb. I mean, he was the saint of all the saints. And he's recorded as having said that he could recollect the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when all the rules met Allah. And then your soul has been there until it finds itself into a body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathes it in. When we were sufficiently physically evolved, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided this is the point in time, that in time in this universe where I'm putting the soul in. So I have no grievance with it. I mean, you can't scientifically argue that chimpanzees, like 90% of our fabric is the same as a chimpanzee. I mean, it's a biological fact. But they're the Neanderthals that died out in Spain 30,000 years ago. You and I have about 2% Neanderthal blood because there was some cohabitation. They had a bigger cranium, about twice the size of our head, but they weren't so developed, the thinking as ours. Our brain is half their size, but it's more developed. But there was a certain amount of intermarriage. All modern insan have about 2% of Neanderthal blood. So I believe in evolution. I think the Quran is a textbook in evolution. It talks about creation. And I don't understand what the problem is, because when we develop to a certain stage, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you are now ready to accept an everlasting soul. And that is when it occurred. There are too many indicia in the Quran on evolution. And it's quite funny, if I walk on the promenade sometime in Mshlanga, you know, people from all over the world in Gauteng want to come here and jump in the water. It's in your DNA, because we originally came from water. I mean, we evolved from water, and that's like, you stand there and look at it, it's quite stupid. They're all just jumping in the waves. When you actually stand back and look at it, it's just stupid. They just jump in, stand up, and they laugh. I mean, I look at it and say, but it's a primordial thing. You're trying to touch the very thing that you came out of. You lost your gills and all that. You can't breathe in there. But when I look at people in the water, they're actually trying to connect, because there's certain, in your DNA, there's a certain thing you carry primordially in you as an insan that you've never forgotten subconsciously. And to me, that is what it is, this constant trying to contact the water and jump in is what it is. But the Quran says unequivocally, I've made you from water. Doesn't man understand? I've made you from water. So I don't think there's any problem between evolution and Islam at all. Just that Allah allowed it to develop in this universe time and then put our everlasting souls. At a time where, we were bipolar, we could stand up and use our hands and things like that, and it decided. And also why the Khatam al-Nabiyyin was 1400 years ago is, for 150,000 years, or most of that, we actually been hunter-gatherers. We've only been Neolithic, agricultural for maybe, the oldest is in a place in Turkey, is the first agrarian settlement, about 15,000 years ago. So the funny thing is that although we have technology, there's not much different between the time of the Nabi Kareem and today in terms of life and living and the market and commerce and trade and like 100,000 years ago, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know he had thousands of Nabis, but that message could never have been completed like it was. I'm not saying, people are saying the end of the world is tomorrow. People have been saying that for thousands of years. Allah knows. But the reason why it's Khatam al-Nabiyyin, there's going to be this kind of development of technology. But I don't think in terms of our habits and urbanization and living in cities and trading in markets, and I don't think much more of that's going to change. That's also why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala terminated the nubuwwat at that stage, because we had got to that point of living in urban areas and agriculture. Dipli Tipli, it's got a very funny name, it's in Turkey. It's called Dipli Tipli. It's a remote place in Turkey, in Andalus. It's the first agricultural site in the world. So I don't have a problem with evolution. I don't know if that answers your question.
I find your response basically interesting. It's very different from what most of this audience, I think, internationally, you get a lot of flack from religious leaders on your beliefs.
Religious leaders and me don't get on too well. And the ones in Durban have realized that since I'm a senior counsel, they just avoid me like the plague. Because they don't know what the concept. I'm just joking. I'm very involved. I actually have a very good relationship with the ulama. I showed a very leading alim today at Jummah that I was speaking. He confessed he had no clue. And he said, Umar Bhai, I'm very glad you're talking about the subject tonight. He's a very humble man, but he didn't pretend. I respect everyone. I have a lot of difficulty with this professional ulama. It's like a priesthood that's very Christian. The early Islamic society, there's no such thing as ulama. Sahaba, everyone lived. You know, you've got to be involved in the real world. And I'm extremely uncomfortable with this professional ulama class because it starts making us look like other religions. And in Islam, you don't have an intercession. You pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yourself when you go home tonight. You don't need a priest. And you know, I'm not very comfortable. And the ulama know I say to them, I'm not speaking behind their back, and I say it respectfully to them. I say very respectfully, I'm not very enamored with the idea at all. And I think we're in a tragic situation in terms of knowledge. When the Library of Alexandria burnt, it was speculated that 50% of the books were in astronomy. I've seen some work recently. Hawking considered Galileo to be like his greatest predecessor. I've seen some very, very compelling work recently that Galileo actually copied everything that he had from an Islamic astronomer. I've seen evidence of that. I mean, his diagrams were exactly ditto. The word algebra is Arabic. The numbers we use. The computer system is binary. There's no zero in Latin. The zero came, we say Islam now, the Sufi will say South or North Indians developed it and then we filtered it to the West. I don't know. But without the zero, there could be no computing. There's no binary system. And there is no zero in Latin. You know, when we're small, we used to do that V1, V2. There is no zero there. So, no, I mean, Fazl Rahman Ansari was here, 45 years ago. I mean, the man was a theologian, he was a physicist, a philosopher, and he had absolutely no problem. He said the early Muslim scholars used to use the Quran as the textbook for evolution, and astronomy and other things as well. So, yes, unfortunately, our ulama are not educated in the real world. I must say, in fairness to them, though, a lot of them are recognizing it now. A lot of them are talking to me. I don't mean because of what I say. They're accepting that the world has just left us behind entirely. So,
sorry, there's two things I want to say. Firstly, I think in defense of the ulama, perhaps we should give them credit for their concern that if people have little knowledge, they might misinterpret. So they rather protect them from misinterpreting the little knowledge they have. That's number one. Number two, coming back to Stephen Hawking.
Trouble is that includes the ulama themselves.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm being tongue-in-cheek.
That's fine, that's fine. Coming back to Stephen Hawking, which is the topic for tonight, I think what I take from this whole, from his life, look, somebody once said that in life, everybody you meet is a teacher. Either you learn what to do or you learn what not to do. For me, when I look at his life, I don't even look at his philosophy or his theory or his science. All I look at is the tenacity of a man with an illness, a debilitating illness, and he didn't give up. And I mean, we give up at the drop of a pin. And that, for me, is the most important lesson out of his life.
Khadija, that's admirable, but I still find his atheism repulsive. I can't.
Of course, I mean,
I can't pretend. I get the man his due,
yeah.
But where he's wrong, he's wrong. I'm not going to be an apologist. He just got it wrong.
He's wrong, but so am I. I mean, I do wrong things too. But
yeah,
I look at the
I'm sure you would have repaid the courtesy and told you that he also thinks you're short in life. But I'm not going to put him on a pedestal, and I can't do that. It's just, I hear what you say. I think it's admirable, but that too is through the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, there's one question here. Oh, you want to take? Okay, let's go for it.
These are all my friends. I haven't planted them in the audience.
I've got a question also on Facebook.
I'm not creating international controversy, am I? I'm actually too old to care, Mom.
Yes.
My experience here today that is I'm leaving here feeling so much more in love with God. That's I think what we were impressed here, because I forget all the sides of the job. I mean, he said some profound things, and it's pretty that Stephen Hawking, as he said, Allah put a seal in front of him, behind him, and it said in the Quran, so he didn't get it, he died. So I'm very sad that he doesn't go to the mosque. Because I think we need speakers like Umar in the mosque, because the young children of today need to see in the modern world. And I mean, I go for lectures and to the mosque, and I mean, we keep talking about the same thing, and yet he did it on a current level, what's happening in the world, and I'm leaving here today feeling better than I leave around Islamic programs. So I want you to be in the mosque.
Jazakallah Yasmin. I can tell you one thing, the study of the cosmos, you couldn't put it better, makes you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, when I spoke at the Eid Namaz, I said, Bibi Aisha shook the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said that, "Oh Nabi, I thought that you had died in your sleep." Now, here was a man that had gone on Buraq, and he has the closest to Allah. Why would he make sajda to Allah the whole night? What? He knows he's guaranteed, he's got the lottery, he bought the ticket, he won the number, he hit the jackpot. Why must he make sajda? The whole night, where she thinks he's dead and she shakes him. The reason why he did it is because when he traveled through the Asman, and when you study the cosmos, I talked about a mass that's 1 billion times that of the sun. The sun burns in its heart at 6,000 degrees. On the corona, it's 2 million degrees when the flares come out. Recently, there was a gamma ray detected in outer space. In 8 seconds, it gave off more heat and light than the sun will do in the next 100,000 years. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, kun fayakun, and this is the lowest of the 7 heavens. Now, the fact that we can even take Allah's name, I mean, I feel, I don't feel fit to take Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. And the Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Sahaba Ikram understood the greatness of their Rabb. And that is why, as chosen as they were, he could the whole night make sajda. Because what he's saying is, Rabb, I mean, we're just insignificant. I mean, in the enormity of who you are and what you are. And there's no doubt. And I must tell you that it's no some greatness on my part. You see, in the apartheid, they threw us out into Kuli areas, and we moved to reservoirs in 1967. And there were hardly any lights there, and the telephones never used to work, and there were very few houses. And the Milky Way looked milky. Wallahi, when you looked up, you actually thought somebody poured a bottle of milk. Wallahi. You can't see it. I've never seen it again. You can't see it. So it was Allah's qudrat that I grew up there. I used to look up, and I used to have the whole night and see. Just wonder at it. I gave the joke at the Eid Namaz, and this is not a lie. Wallahi, 10 years ago, 50 years ago in Los Angeles, California had a power failure like our ESCOM, load shedding. And in Los Angeles, they all phoned the radio station to say that what's those objects in the sky? They thought they were UFOs. They had never seen stars before. Wallahi, I'm not lying. They didn't know what stars were. And this is the curse of the modern life, that every Nabi was a shepherd looking out in the sky. Allah tells you, look at it. But how? What must kids do? You look up, you see bugger all there. It's very tragic. So it don't come greatness. I just moved into a rural area, and that time it was a farm. Reservoirs was a farm. And the Milky Way was milky. I mean, it was just, I can't tell you how beautiful it was. So, Shakira.
I know you touched on Miraj, and you also touched on some of the Sufi scholars in terms of how they define time and space. And it could be the whole Miraj, the concept. Can you explain it from a scientific point of view? That's, I don't know, and
I said that's what Professor Fazlur Rahman Ansari said.
So I'm talking, in terms of the matrix and whatever the reality is not what we think we are, we can change our reality. That's one thing I wanted to touch on. And then we spoke about the primordial sense that we water. But what about the primordial sound in the black hole where there's light? Is there vibration? Is there a sound, that primordial sound, like whether it's who or whether it's om? Thank you.
Can I answer your last question first? Firstly, everything about the black hole is theory because nobody's seen it. If you, the theory is if you enter the event horizon, and I watch you from Earth if I could, I would see you slowing down, and you wouldn't notice a thing. And until you're over the horizon, and you would then disappear, and you'll be made into spaghetti. That is the way they describe it. Very late in his life, Hawking changed his view that nothing could escape from a black hole, and they've called that a Hawking radiation. Now, it gets very complicated because there's a principle of physics that information is never lost in the universe. So, the paradox is that it sucks information in, whether it's in the form of a human being or any other information. But the conventional wisdom is if it does emit radiation, it comes out in a completely disintegrated form. Now, that contradicts one of the basic principles of the universe, which information is never lost. So, exactly what happens in the black hole, no one knows. There's speculation that it might lead to another universe. Now, that's not un-Islamic, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are 7 heavens. The only way that you can have time travel is, you see, even at the speed of light, the closest star is 4.3 light years away. You have to travel at 300,000 kilometers a second, which you can't do. And in science fiction at least, and also science fact, what Einstein showed was that the universe is bent by space and by time. It's a curvature. And it's not the 3 dimensions we imagine. In fact, there's some speculation that the universe is 9 dimensions. We can't see it. And the one way that you will travel is like if you could bend space like this. Now, if I'm here and you are here, take me forever. But if I could bend it, then you are right next door to me. And my very good friend here, Mr. A.K. Parak, his favorite subject is wormholes. That's the wormhole that takes you from here to there. And there's some speculation that that's what a black hole is. It'll either take you to another part of the universe, or it'll take you into another universe, a parallel universe. But no one knows, and certainly not in our lifetime, we're not going to find out. So whether there's any sound there, I don't know. Certainly, whatever material goes in is supposed to disappear because it gets into intense, infinite density and infinite mass, and it just disappears. It just pops, it just goes. That is the theory. What is inside, no one knows. I've come across no writing that talks about sound in the black hole. There may be radiation, and they now call it Hawking radiation. But they're not sure. And it's certainly not the information that went in. It's like putting in mince or putting in a piece of meat and it comes out like mince. That's the last question. Your Miraj, remember I said that there are occasions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does disturb the physical laws of the universe, and I think the Miraj is one of those instances where he's the supreme being and he can disturb the laws. Many scholars accept that very pious people like Sufis are able to overcome space and time. I've just finished reading a book called Misquoting the Prophet by Professor at Georgetown University. What's the name today? Jonathan Thomas? Jonathan Brown. And he writes about the development of fiqh and uzul over the centuries. And he is a revert and a very powerful Muslim. And he accepts the fact that Muslims have accepted that very, very pious people are able to leave one part of the world, go to the Haram Sharif, make salah and come back. I mean, here's he, American revert, brilliant man, absolutely world-renowned, writing is profound. He accepts that there comes a level of piety and Sufism where you go on the tasawwuf and you get there, you can actually, that ordinary people are able to leave the subcontinent, go and make Maghrib Salah in the Haram and come back. Now, if you think of it, that's really also bending the laws of physics. I'm not a Sufi, but they say that when you get into Sufism and you get to that very high level, the dunya disintegrates. You actually, I said to you earlier, we're not reality. Everything, even the mountains, you just see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why they see the countenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever we see materially disappears for them. They don't actually see it. And when you're at that level, then obviously I don't think time and space. But you have to be very careful because Averroes, Ibn Sina and others, they then said they had reached a level where the normal rituals were not required of them. This was in Spain. And Imam al-Ghazali, who became he died very young, 48, but he became a Sufi at the end of his life, and he rejected that entirely. He said, look, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have gardens with rivers. But for purposes of this dunya, he said it is haram not to accept it at face value. In fact, in his confessions, he said, I can't tell you what I've seen and experienced because if I do, you will call me a disbeliever. So he said, I refuse to tell you. But he gave some, he said, I'll share some stuff with you. And he did. And he rejected that. And as I said to you, whether we appreciate it or not, every single one of us today in the Sunni Islam follows Imam Ghazali. He joined the esoteric and the exoteric for the first time. And he put them together. He said you must have Iman and Islam. You can't have one without the other. And he was the first person to put it together. And that is the Islam we're supposed to follow today. Although I think today it's more exoteric, very little esoteric. It's all rituals, make sure you make your salah. But he did say, no matter what you see and who you see, you make your salah, you make your namaz, you do everything normal. You believe in heaven, you believe in hell, you believe in the garden. Whether it turns out that way, he said, I'm not telling you that's for sure, but you just believe it exactly as it is. And we all subscribe to his school. All of us, whether we realize it or no matter what book you read or kitab, it's all based on his teaching. So you had a third question, but I've forgotten that. I'm sorry.
I think we...
Matrix is too... beyond time. Another session. You won't pay me for today, Mom.
That's for the friendship we have for 40 years. But Jazakallah khair, I think there's many more questions. I think it was a very, very stimulating discussion. I think exposition of this very deep subject, the black holes. It's a lot. I was going to ask a few questions to Omar as well, but I think we don't have time now. Perhaps another topic maybe sometime in the future. I think something else. And maybe extend it. Brother Muhammad Patel, you are sitting somewhere, I don't know where you are, and he asked the question through Facebook. See, well, you forget what technology, you stood behind. You know so much of cosmos, but you haven't got this.
BBC, one before computers, I don't understand.
BBC, okay. Muhammad Patel, you asked the question, directed to you, Umar. He says, are you saying then that evolution is true? Don't answer it, Umar. I think you already answered.
No,
exactly. So, Brother Muhammad Patel and all those people who are watching on Facebook Live, the Facebook Live event will stay on the Islamic Forum website. You can go back and re-watch the video, and all of you here, go and spread this word, because I think this is a fantastic subject, really, that we haven't done justice to, but maybe, Umar, what about you writing a book? I'll publish it for you. Soraya, you here, Soraya?
It's getting very ambitious for me, Muhammad.
Soraya? No, seriously. I will, as a payback for this session, I'll publish it free of charge.
Inshallah.
Nazir?
Talk about it.
Okay. I think it needs to be done.
Muhammad, I thought Brother Omar would
touch on it, but you know when you mentioned about the power family in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Now we know that Stephen Hawking was very passionate about alien life and extraterrestrial life. You can just throw some light on that.
Actually, you send me an email of all of this. We'll do that for another question.
Send me an email, I'll answer that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a fascinating topic, and I think it's Muslim scientists, Muslim philosophers explored the universe, explored the world through the Quran. That was the source of inspiration, and there's enough ayahs and enough evidence there that how Muslims were scientific, were empirical, rather than the Greek and the Romans were purely philosophical. And that's when we changed the whole foundation of knowledge and science that we gave to the world was through experimentation and the empirical evidence that has to be existing for us to be able to make a firm, concrete proof or actually extrapolate the theory from there. So I think this is where Muslim scientists gave the world a completely different definition of knowledge and science. The kind of question I was going to ask you, Omar, was which of our early scientists really explored the idea of the cosmos and the universe and the kind of knowledge that behind? And I agree with you that when the Mongols ransacked Baghdad, and when the river Euphrates was full not only of blood but also the ink of the books that were actually thrown into the river, that knowledge that we had is just gone, and it's a pity. I'm going to leave you with one more last thing that I thought I'll share with you. And somebody in Cape Town told me about a couple of weeks ago while I was there. Says our young children, our children don't seem to know what Muslim scholars and scientists have done and the legacy they have left behind. And I have with me just about 10 books. They're actually written for children, and I would say grade age 9, 10, that age. But I think even you as adults need to read these books and read it to your children. And this is on the science, and it's like Al-Khwarizmi, who was the father of what? Trigonometry, okay? Or Umar Khayyam, okay? Or Al-Baitar, Jabal bin Hayyan, the chemist, Al-Razi, philosopher, Ibn Haytham. What did Ibn Haytham do? Ibn Haytham, anybody? Optics, okay? The man who gave the camera to the world. Comes from the word kamara, which is a room with a light. So if you think cameras are haram, this is the man who invented the camera or made the science. Ibn Khaldun, the greatest contributor to history and science. Ibn Sina, the father of medicine. Ibn Battuta, the father of travel, the man who designed the maps of the world. And Ibn Biruni. So, I mean, these are just 10 collection of great scientists that we don't have knowledge of, particularly for our young children. So, it's a bit of a commercial for me, because, I do books, I publish and I sell books. It's available on Baitul Hikmah, and it's only 200 some odd rand, so it's really cheap. I want to conclude and say, Umar, Jazakallah khair for a fascinating session. I think this was really, I thought you said 8, but 8:30 we finished.
What's the time? I don't know what I think.
8:50, 9:54, and we advertise at 8 to 10, so we're on time. MashaAllah. We still have tea and refreshments. Brothers and sisters, and anybody else, there's a register that's going around. Now, what we do is we don't put posters, we don't make announcements in mosque boards. Okay, we are on social media. Power of social. Can you see? This is from social media.
MashaAllah.
This is just from sending out.
What people like you who's already.
Okay, so it's purely through social media, through our Facebook page, through our emails and WhatsApps. I think we're now getting into the WhatsApp as well, and we just keep broadcasting this, spread the word. This center, this forum is meant to engage people. We'd love to have this session in the mosque, but I don't think Umar they'll probably give the boot. So now, unfortunately, Umar, you've said a lot of things that's on one public, right? So your own defense.
I must say, in fairness, I've had muftis in Durban ask me to come and address the ulama of this.
Okay, lovely, fantastic.
I was being facetious.
Okay.
They're not that behind it.
No, they
Mufti
catch up.
Bayat wants me to address him and other ulama, and so
Very good.
I was just being a bit naughty.
Okay, so I think that there's a lot there that needs to be explored for the future, and perhaps even run a course. Seriously, I think it's a teaching course. No, seriously, I think we could really expand this audience and really become a learning. That's our idea here. This forum and this center is to do that. So let me just conclude to say that future events, we have, this is the month of March, April, I think one session is coming through, but on the 2nd of May, we have Sheikh Nuruddin Limu, who's from Nigeria. He is the son of Ahmad Limu, Judge Ahmad Limu, and Aisha Limu. He'll be running a course on Sharia intelligence. So if you, please, there's a register out there. You must give us your email and cell number so we can communicate all the time with you. He's running a program, a teaching program for an entire day called Sharia intelligence. In Ramadan, we're hoping to have Imam Afroz Ali from Australia. He'll be talking about transformative ethics. So another very deep subject, transformative ethics. Will be in the month of Ramadan, a Saturday and Sunday. So so this forum is for us to do that. So if you want to be invited to sessions, I don't know how you got this message here, except for social media, but if you want to be specifically invited to some of these sessions, please fill the register and you will then be invited for it. So once again,